eyes on the press conference. Dana, you've seen your fair share of these, that's for certain. What did you think was the news coming out of today?
Two main things, I think, coming out of it. One was one of the president's stated purposes for having the press conference and for the whole NATO conference was to talk about the end of combat in Afghanistan and our troops coming home, and we've been working with NATO for many years. I'll set aside the policy side of things and my disagreements there. I thought it was a strong statement by him, although a little bit they didn't get enough questions, I don't think, about it. There was one good question about Pakistan and its role, and in addition, he had to answer a question about a New York Times front page story today that ran by David Sanger, who's a seasoned foreign correspondent for them. He has a book coming out about the decisions leading into the getting the U.S. troops out of Afghanistan and ending that mission. So I'd say that was the first bit of news. The second one was a reactionary one after yesterday's news about continued attacks from the Obama camp against Romney on Bain Capital. This is the private equity firm that Romney worked for. And then Newark Mayor Cory Booker, who is a surrogate for President Obama. That means a supporter and somebody that speaks, that they think should speak on their behalf. And in a truthful moment yesterday on Meet the Press, said how he felt under pressure, then released a video that was then trying to walk that back. President Obama had to answer that. I would say from his perspective, he probably answered that as well as he could, though I think splitting hairs about what is good equity and bad equity means that they're a little bit in trouble and running out of steam on that issue. So I'd say those are the two main things. And a really nice shout out about Chicago, his hometown. Yeah, that was a nice touch to it. Eric?
So I took notes. I sat here the whole time. 8 minutes the president spoke. He gave his speech, and then 28 minutes of Q&A. 6 questions, 3 on Afghanistan, 1 on the G8, 1 on Chicago, as Dana points out. And the most important one for me, at least politically, was the question on Cory Booker. He spent the most time on that one. He talked about the difference between private equity and big government, and he said private equity isn't necessarily the right way to go. Big government might be the way to go. And I think it's important. There was a line he said at 4:38 Eastern Time. He said, the campaign is going to be about this. Now, that's very important, because if President Obama wants to make the campaign about whether or not Bain Capital and private equity is good or bad, he's going to have a tough time, because I think there's going to be a lot of people out there, including Cory Booker, including Steve Ratner, his own car czar, and including Harold Ford Jr., another Democrat, who say, you know what, don't make it about that. So they may be seeing a divide in the Democratic Party if they wanted to go ahead and go forward with it as it is. All right, we're going to get to Greg, and then Bob gets to back clean up. See what he has to say.
Well, I think the real hero here is me. Because I stayed awake. That was tough. I feel bad for all the 5 viewers there who were just waiting for us and just kind of like, I got to stay awake. I got to stay awake. And also, it's Pakistan, not Pakistan.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, if you've been listening to the president, it's Pakistan. He also said, of course, that the summit was unprecedented, which he always says about just about everything that he does, that it's unprecedented. What is precedented? I'm not sure. Here's the thing. When he said that point about if all you care about is making a profit, then that's not what this job is about. That's not what being president is about, is making a profit. But it should be, because if you could make a profit, then you could afford these programs that could bankrupt our country. Maybe you should think about trying to make a profit.
Yep. Now, Bob, what do you think? I mean, he seems to have hit all the points. He came out of this pretty clean.
Well, let me try to take it away from the sort of crass political side of this thing. I thought there were some interesting comments made about the missiles.
Jeez. I thought that I was fairly even-handed.
I was pointing to Eric.
That's why I looked at David.
I apologize, Dan. I pointed to Greg. Eric, excuse me.
I'm over here.
Greg, well, either one of them. I'm going to change.
The hero.
I thought the unanimity in NATO, which is generally very difficult to come together around, appears as if they did find some common ground on a number of things. Secondly, missile defense, which has been a very thorny issue, particularly with in terms of the Soviet Union. I think it seems to be resolved. There was an interesting thing that everybody seemed to go by, which was that Turkey was giving up their missile defense system and turning it over to NATO, which I found a little surprising. The last thing is that the 2014 date, which had been going back and forth between 2013 and 2014 to get out of Afghanistan, seems to have been settled on 2014, which will not make my side of the aisle all that happy. And on the, I will say this: on the Cory Booker and that was bound to come up. I thought he handled that fine. And let's remember that New Jersey is owned and operated by private equity, so I don't think it matters much.
Can I just weigh in on that? New Jersey isn't owned and operated by private equity. Private equity happens to have a $135 billion stake in the U.S. New Jersey, I think, comes in 10 or 12 There are a lot of states that are more affected by private equity. And again, that is why this President Obama is saying the campaign is going to be about this, is going to cost them, because there are 5 swing states that have substantial private equity investments in their states. This is a losing proposition.
Well, let's talk about investments. Just if I could stay with one other substantive issue besides Cory Booker, is on Greece. I think there was a big push on his part to say to the rest of the NATO alliance, it's time to step up here. We cannot let this 11 million population country take the rest of us down. And he seemed to be saying it's time to do some stimulus in Greece.
Right, and actually that was a big bone of contention yesterday as people were reading some of the tea leaves coming out of the NATO, the G8 meeting that was held at Camp David over the weekend before they got to Chicago. And the question being, so does the United States, having had a failed stimulus over the past 3 years, in a good position to be telling Greece before it even, or in the rest of Europe, before it even begins to implement austerity measures, that they should do more stimulus because, for one stated reason, because that would help American businesses back here? That made me a little bit uncomfortable. And I think that I think if you could agree that everything needs to be on the table, austerity and some pro-growth policies, that would be a better position from which the United States should.
You know, the other thing I would say, again, on NATO has been, every NATO conference has been talking about expanding NATO out to a number of other countries. This is the first time that did not come up. My guess is that that issue is now closed, at least for the next year or two.
I think that's unfortunate too, because there's a lot of countries that want to be a part of it.
But I think the politics are too difficult to put out.
Right.
I'm not sure what was his stand on austerity.
That austerity isn't everything. That they should make sure that you pump money into the economy as well.
Yeah, but I mean, that is kind of like a junkie telling another junkie not to quit doing drugs. At a certain point, they have to embrace austerity. Everybody knows that.
Except them.
Yeah.
I
don't think he should be the one telling them to stay. They need the cold hard medicine of austerity. He shouldn't be telling them.
Yeah, but the cold hard medicine of austerity is proving to be a big mistake.
How?
I mean, all these countries that cut back on spending, London, England, for example.
England hasn't.
England has.
No, they haven't.
Of course they have.
No, they haven't.
In France, they hadn't even begun to.
Well, they hadn't begun, but they had in England for sure. And the fact of the matter is that unemployment rates have not gone down at all.
The most stable of all of them is England, between Germany and England.
Well, you can austerity yourself right back into recession if you want to. Stimulus is the way to go.
Eric, what do you think?
Just spend more and more money for hyperinflation.
It doesn't matter.
He did exactly.
If it doesn't matter, then we don't need taxes. Just create the money.
Okay,
just actually print the money and don't take taxes.
This is actually genius. President Obama was actually genius what he did. He said, you know what you guys should do? You should try more stimulus. Stimulus is a way to go for you rather than austerity, because then he can stay true to his political left here. He's done it before. He's tried it. It's not working, but he can say, this is what I told them to do, and it's not going to cost us a dime.
So it's consistent with his messaging, and it's not going to be improper for him politically to hurt him.
Who's going to pay for their stimulus? Who's going to pony up the tens or hundreds of billions of dollars that has to go to Greece, Spain, Italy, and Portugal?
You know who's paying for their austerity? A lot of people being thrown out of work.
The Germans are going to pay, and they don't want any part of it.
Show me where austerity has worked. Show me where it's worked.
Germans are tired.
Show me where the stimulus has worked.
Right here. Saved us from a depression.
Well, okay.
And we're 4 million plus jobs better than we were 4 years ago.
There's fewer people
That's
working
15 minutes of a debatable topic. Okay. And a
whiteboard.
That's not true.
Go ahead, Eric.
We're not 4 million jobs. We're 500,000 jobs worse than we were.
No, since the first stimulus check went out.
Well,
you keep counting those 3 days after Obama was elected president.
You thing that only when the stimulus checks were cashed do we start the clock.
Well, actually, so the week after he became president, those jobs that were lost were not the Bush administration's. That was the Obama administration. Is that right?
Even if we set that aside,
8% unemployment was the promise for $863 billion. So
even if setting that aside, the economy is stagnant at best right now, and so even if that were true, then it's run out. So let's just play that out in Europe. Say that they put a bunch more money in. We're going to have the same conversation in 3 years, and the problem then is going to be exacerbated and worse. So.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean?
But the point is, if you use that to take it to the logical extreme, you don't need to collect taxes then, do you? Because the deficit doesn't matter. Right. So just spend more money. You can make more money.
That's a broken.
We're in a stagnant economy. Our growth rate is up every single month. I mean, so why are we in a stagnant economy?
Well, one, we have fewer people working now. We have one of the lowest participation rates in our labor force since the 1980s. That's because of discouraged workers that aren't counted in the unemployment.
That's true. A lot of that is true. Although a lot of it has to do with this massive number of baby boomers who are moving into Social Security.
Eric, final comment.
Last thought. The growth stinks, Bob. we're subpar growth right now, so we can't say.
Are we growing or are we not growing?
We're finally growing after almost 3 years of recession.
That's what I'm going to say.
Which would have happened with or without.
When did we start growing? When did we start growing? How many quarters ago?
3 maybe.
But he's saying it's independent of anything that the president has done, that you would have seen the same model, but it isn't significant enough because we're still stagnant.
So we've been a lot better off with John McCain.
My two favorite words of this segment were stagnant and subpar.
Yeah,
those were good words. Pakistan.
You used both of them. Yes, that's correct. All right, well, I feel a whiteboard coming on now between Eric and Bob. I don't know. But coming up, a close Obama ally condemns the president for his attacks on Romney's record at Bain Capital. Stay with us.